It was a drizzly October afternoon in the Yorkshire Dales, the kind that clings to your skin like a persistent regret, turning the world into a watercolor smear of grays and muted greens. The wind whispered through the skeletal branches of the hawthorns lining the churchyard path, carrying the faint, earthy scent of turned soil and impending frost. St. Mary's in Havas stood as it had for centuries, a squat, sturdy edifice of weathered stone, its bell tower a silent sentinel over the valley. That morning, we'd laid Ernest to rest there, his oaken casket gleaming dully under the pall of mourners' umbrellas before it was swallowed by the grave. At 66, I'd imagined our twilight years stretching out like the endless fells, lazy mornings with
Guardian crossword by the Aga, afternoon rambles along the River Yore with our lurchers at heel, evenings laced with a dram of single malt and stories from his wool mill days. But fate, that cruel jester, had other plans. A heart attack, the coroner pronounced, sudden as a snapped thread, merciless as the Pennine gales. The funeral had been a subdued affair, befitting our unassuming life in the Dales. A vicar from Sedberg, borrowed for the day, intoned the liturgy with the rote solemnity of a man who'd buried too many in his time. In the midst of life we are in death, he droned, his voice barely rising above the patter of rain on the canvas marquee. Our gathering was sparse. Clara, my sister-in-law, with her peroxide waves plastered under a sodden hat, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief that seemed more prop than solace. Young Tom, Ernest's nephew and her shadow, fidgeting in a suit 2 sizes too tight, his phone buzzing mutedly in his pocket as he stole glances at the time. A smattering of Ernest's, old mates from the mill, grizzled, men with calloused hands and faces etched by decades of warp and weft, murmuring condolences that felt as threadbare as their tweed jackets. And me, Margot Hayes, standing apart in my black wool coat, the hem heavy with damp, my fingers numb around the handle of a furled umbrella. Grief hadn't hit yet. It hovered, a storm cloud just beyond the horizon, leaving me adrift in a sea of mechanical nods and hollow embraces. The graveside service dragged on, the vicar committing Ernest's dust to dust as the pallbearers, Tom among them, grunting under the weight, lowered the casket with ropes that creaked, like old rigging, clods of clay, slick from the rain, thudded onto the lid, each one a punctuation mark on our 32 years together. I stared at the brass plate engraved with his name, Ernest Porter Hayes, 1959-2025, and felt a chasm yawn inside me. We'd met at a barn dance in Grassington, him all lanky limbs and shy grin, twirling me through a reel until dawn. He'd built our stone cottage with his own hands, mortaring the walls while I planted the herb garden. We'd weathered redundancies, a miscarriage that still ached like an old bruise, the slow creep of his arthritis, and now this, gone just like that. Then my mobile buzzed in the depths of my coat pocket, a low, insistent vibration that cut through the murmur like a knife. I ignored it at first, assuming some well-meaning relative from Carlisle firing off a platitude. But it thrummed again, more urgent, as if demanding audience. Fumbling with chilled fingers, I tugged off my glove and fished it out. The screen glowed accusingly, unknown number. The message was stark, stripped of preamble. I am still alive, trust no one.
The world tilted. My breath caught, a ragged gasp lost in the wind. Ernest's face flashed before me not. The pallid mask in the opened casket, earlier that morning, with its waxy sheen and that telltale scar on his jaw from a tumble in the spinning room, back at 89. But the living man, eyes crinkling at the corners, that crooked smile that could coax a laugh from the gloomiest day, impossible. The word looped in my skull, a frantic mantra. I scanned the cluster of mourners sharply. Clara was leaning into Tom, her hand possessive on his arm, whispering something that made him nod with a tight-lipped smirk. The undertaker, Mr. Hargreaves, from the parlour in Leyburn, was methodically folding his ledger, his face impassive as a ledger entry. The mill lads shuffled their feet, lighting damp ciggies under the marquee. No one glanced my way. The rain blurred their outlines, turning faces to smudges.
Heart hammering like a blacksmith's anvil. I excused myself with a murmur about needing air and slipped away to the church's vestibule, a dim, chilly nook redolent of beeswax polish and forgotten incense. The heavy oak door thudded shut behind me, muffling the outer world. My thumbs trembled over the keys as I typed. Ernest? Is this you? How on earth is this possible? Send. The whoosh echoed in the silence. I paced the flagstones, my brogues clicking sharply, breath fogging the air. Minutes stretched into an eternity, each tick of the grandfather clock in the nave a taunt. Then buzz, not safe here. Clara's watching. Meet at the old gamekeeper's cabin by the reservoir. Midnight. Burn this phone after. Reading. A photo loaded. Pixelated and shadowed, but the details seared. A figure in a wax jacket. Hood up against the drizzle. Jawline etched with that jagged scar. Lips quirked in our private signal. A half-smile that said, "Hold on, love." Disbelief warred with a dawning terror. I pocketed the phone and rejoined the scattering crowd, forcing smiles through the receiving line of handshakes and hugs that smelled of wet wool and sympathy. Clara air-kissed my cheeks, her perfume cloying as overripe fruit. "Chin up, Margot dear. Ernest wouldn't want you moping." Tom clapped my shoulder a touch too firmly, his eyes flicking to my pocket. "If you need anything at all." His grip lingered, probing. The wake at the Drover's Inn was a blur of sherry glasses and cheese straws, voices overlapping in a din of reminiscences. "Remember that time in the mill flood?" "Aye, Ernie saved the day." I nodded mechanically, excusing myself early with a headache feigned from the damp. The drive home wound through the gathering dusk, the Dales unfolding in folds of heather and limestone, the Ure a silver ribbon below. Our cottage in Hawes hunkered at the end of a rutted lane, its mullioned windows dark, the chimney cold for the first time since we'd moved in. The lurchers, Bess and Jock, whined at the gate, tails thumping uncertainty. Inside the air hung heavy, Ernest's pipe rack on the mantel a ghost of tobacco and cherry wood. I bolted the door and made straight for his study, a cramped lair of oak, desk and sagging bookcases, stuffed with ledgers from his consultancy days post-mill closure. Papers cascaded as yanked drawers, invoices for machinery he'd flogged online, bank statements inked red with debts from a daft venture into artisanal yarns. Some, Leeds sharks had strung him along with promises of grants that never materialized. Tucked beneath a stack of Farmer's Weekly, a manila envelope sealed with wax. Inside, frantic scrawls in his angular hand, debts mounting. Investors from the city, ruthless lot. Threatened the lot of us. Faked accident staged. Body double sourced. Will altered. Clara's doing? Vanish for good. Love you always. E. My stomach churned. The autopsy report, clipped to the fridge weeks back, now seemed suspect. Dates blurred. Signature a facsimile squiggle. And the will, couriered last month. Updated for tax purposes, leaving the cottage. The pension pot, the mill shares to Clara and Tom. Me? A nominal bequest for sentimental items. Barely enough for a month's council tax. Trust no one. The warning clawed at me. In the scullery, I filled the sink with yesterday's tea leaves and doused the phone, striking a match from the Rayburn drawer. It flared, devouring silicon and secrets in acrid smoke. I scattered the ashes in the compost, hands shaking. By 9, the lurchers fed and kennelled. I was in the Rover, headlights carving the night towards Widdale Fell. The reservoir lay a mile above, its waters a black mirror under the gibbous moon, fringed by conifers that rustled like conspirators. The track was a quagmire, tires slithering over potholes, the engine's growl my only companion. Halfway up, a gleam in the rear view. Headlights, low and predatory, hugging the bends. Tom's saloon, that souped-up Audi he flashed about the village. I doused my lights, heart and throat, veering into a sheepfold to let him pass. He slowed, beam sweeping the verges, then accelerated with a rev that echoed off the crags. The cabin emerged from the gloom, a derelict bothy from Ernest's poaching youth, roof patched with corrugated tin, walls mossy and leaning. I killed the engine. The silence absolute save for the lap of water and a curlew's cry. Midnight tolled distant from some valley church. The door creaked on iron hinges, spilling lamplight like honey. There he stood, gaunt as a wraith, beard unkempt, eyes hollowed by shadows. But him, the scar gleamed livid in the flicker. He yanked me over the threshold, door slamming. His embrace a vice of flannel and fevered muscle, reeking of damp earth and pine tar. "God, Margot," he rasped, voice gravel from days of silence. "Thought I'd lost you to the grief." Collapsed onto a threadbare rug by the peat stove, its embers pulsing like a heartbeat. He spilled it in fits, the crash on the A684. staged with a decoy lorry and a body from a Bradford morgue. Unclaimed, unmissed, likeness uncanny, under makeup and morticians. Art. Clara had wormed in months back, playing the concerned sibling, rifling his files while he slept. Tom, her puppet, the muscle, eager for the inheritance to fund his gambling debts in Harrogate. Bookies. The investors, a syndicate of city suits, fronts for something murkier, loans with knees and knuckles collection. Had to die, love, properly, or they'd have buried us both. We huddled through the night, sharing a flask of his hoarded whiskey, the stove's glow painting our faces in amber. Outside, Tom's headlights prowled the reservoir's edge, torch beam lancing the dark like accusations. Ernest had contingencies. Pinhole cams in the cottage study, synced to a cloud drive. Audio of Clara's hissed calls to the forger in Hull. Make it quick. The old bag sniffing around. Tom's texts bartering the cadaver price down. Play your part, Ernest murmured, pressing a burner phone into my palm. Dawn slipped back. Confront the solicitor. I've got your back from the shadows. Ernest resurfaced in the hush of acquittal, slipping into the cottage under cover of gloaming. We sold up, the Dales too laced with ghosts, and fled north, to a croft on the Sutherland coast, where the sea crashes eternal and the wind scours secrets clean. He shaved the beard, but the gauntness lingers. I catch him staring at horizons, as if expecting shadows. The lurchers adapted, chasing gulls on Macaire sands. We've a new life, him tinkering with a lobster boat, me weaving kelp into baskets for the tourists in Dornoch. Yet trust? That's a fractured thing. When my phone buzzes in the small hours, wind alerts are nothing at all. I jolt awake, pulse racing. Ernest squeezes my hand by the peat fire, his scar a map of survival. Worth it, eh? He murmurs, that crooked smile flickering. I nod, tracing the lines of his face and whisper yes. But in the quiet, doubts whisper back. Was the man I buried truly dead? Or did we kill something vital in faking his end? Betrayal's blade cuts deep, leaves you forever glancing. Over your shoulder at the graves you thought you'd filled. And in these wild northern nights, with the aurora veiling the sky, I wonder if we'll ever truly rest.